There is a background net, never really been made public, that the master designers in ancient Egypt used to lay out the figures on the temple wall. But it wasn't simply something so that you could arrange the aspects of the art on the wall. It actually had a vibrational component to it. It is used by us today in modern Egyptian biogeometry to be able to test vibrational qualities for any person, place, or thing to a very, very deep level. It was one of the great secrets of ancient Egypt and other old traditions, connected to the Shakti concept of the Himalayan tradition. And what it actually does is it is the carrier wave that sends all the other energies. It was found by the French it could penetrate thicknesses of lead that could not be penetrated by X-rays. And so they were fascinated by it. And so in applying the negative green carrier wave energy, it is what inside the physical body actually moves the energy from one location to another, makes the organs work. And it also sends things from one system to another system. It is what conducts the energy in the energy meridians of the body, like the acupuncture meridians from the Chinese tradition. It is the foundation of sexual energy and vitality in the body. At the emotional and mental level, it breaks down resistance, opening up the blocked psychological aspects of a person to open to massive shifts in one's life, and brings subconscious blockages into awareness. At the spiritual level, it actually conducts the energy from higher plane levels into the human physical body. And the more spiritual activity a person does, blessing, prayer, meditation, etc., the stronger this vibration is from their energetic field. All of our modern technology is based on cracking two codes: the code of the spectrum of electromagnetic energy and the code of the spectrum of physical matter. We call the spectrum of physical matter the periodic table of elements, based on the work of Mendeleev in the late 1800s in Russia. Now, once we cracked the code where we identified every aspect of electromagnetic energy and every part of physical substance in the world, at that point they could put the two together. So all of our modern technology is based on knowing what exact elements from the periodic table to match with what frequencies from the electromagnetic spectrum. And that's what makes your cell phone work. That's what makes the lights work at your house. What makes your car run. Everything is based on a combination of these two things. But, as we often describe in the work of biogeometry, what they left out was the focus of every classical tradition, because it's only been the last couple of hundred years that modern science and medicine has only focused on the physical plane. Before that, every classical tradition focused on the level of vital life force and higher consciousness above the physical, and they manipulated those energies to be able to do things on the physical plane. They actually worked at the causative level above the physical that actually gives rise to the physical level itself. Today we manipulate the physical directly, the physical and the electromagnetic. There's often a confusion about vital life force being electromagnetic energy, and I don't believe that's actually the case. I think the best solution to this was given by the great Rosicrucian teacher Rudolf Steiner, where he described the way that the vital life force, which is the foundation of every classical scientific and healing system, is at a level above the physical. And that is like what was referred to as scalar waves by Nikola Tesla. And these higher energies from the vibrational level, referred to as the etheric in the Greek tradition, referred to as qi in the Chinese tradition, ki in Japan, prana in India, etc. Every tradition had a name for it. That energy penetrates down into the physical and animates physical substance. The human physical body without this is a corpse. It animates physical substance, but in so doing it slows down below the speed of light and begins to disintegrate. As it disintegrates, it gets to be retarded Hertzian waves as described by Tesla and becomes the electromagnetic spectrum. So the problem is that we've created a new technology that's very powerful for manipulating physical structures, but does not take into account what the effect of the vibrations from these are on actual living beings, because the actual living aspect of biological life has been stripped out of modern biology. You're not allowed to describe it. If you try to talk about life force in modern biology, they will say that you are a victim of the vitalist fallacy, and they will have nothing to do with you. So the knowledge of thousands of years of observations and particular techniques in Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, Mayan healing, all types of traditions all over the world have been completely cast out. But now, with having identified in modern times the electromagnetic and physical spectrums, the French succeeded in identifying the vibrational spectrum, the level connected to the vital life force itself. And that became a foundation for the creation of modern biogeometry. Now, some of this was connected to the knowledge in ancient Egypt, but it's in a new form. Dr. Ibrahim Karim demonstrated that through applying a simple geometric form to biological life, he could change the life functions in a biological system through very simple geometric forms. And one of the big discoveries of Dr. Karim is that one thing identified is that the French vibrational spectrum of the 12 bands, each of these bands has a very particular power, and that power is a polarized power. Some are more yin, some are more yang. Some are more activating, some are more sedating. But he said there's another power, and that is the power that is beyond polarity. That is the power of the original singularity, of the original center, the energy of the unified source of all creation that is beyond polarity, where everything is one. And so then he began to apply these vibrational methods that the French had pioneered in modern times based on their inspiration from ancient Egypt. And he then found a way to be able to identify the vibrational characteristic of that energy of the center, of that original unified source, the energy that harmonizes and balances all living energy systems, not through applying an opposite polarity for polarity balancing, but by directly activating the center itself. And he found that one of the hallmarks of that vibration from the center is a gold vibration, and that classical traditions consider this gold vibration to be the source of physical gold. Physical gold, as everything in the physical plane, is a crystallization into physical matter of a subtle vibration from a higher level. And so all of these references in different traditions, the Taoists, the Christians, the ancient Egyptians talking about the gold, was not a metaphor, it's quite literal. So when a person does advanced spiritual work, the saints develop the golden aura around their head and their body, because they're in resonance with the center. They're in resonance with the original unified source. And so Dr. Karim took his work further and was able to identify some of the secrets of ancient Egypt through this vibrational science that he developed and called biogeometry. One of the aspects of this is that different geometric forms, based on the shape-caused wave, create different energetic effects. But there's a deeper level behind that, and that is different geometric forms actually resonate with different levels of creation, or what Dr. Karim calls planes of nature. So this is a form that we use in advanced level of biogeometry, called the Ibrahim Karim Universal Pendulum, and it actually combines shapes of multiple different plane levels: the physical, the vital, the emotional astral, the mental, the causal, the spiritual, and the divine levels, that all have particular geometries that resonate with them. This means that by using the correct geometric form, the ancient Egyptians understood they could create a direct resonant exchange, like with an antenna, based on the sacred geometry. Sacred geometry became an antenna to resonate with a particular higher plane. So for example, if we take a look at this level, what in the human being is the emotional body and emotional function, and referred to as an outer plane in the Western tradition as the astral plane. Astral coming from a root aster, meaning star, meaning a source of light. And the forms that connect to that are the form of a hemisphere or a pyramid. So when they use the form of a pyramid, it wasn't just for pyramid power as an energy, but what pyramid power actually is the negative green ray that was identified by the French, the penetrating carrier ray. That comes from this particular form. Both a hemisphere and a pyramid create that negative green emanation. But the reason why that form is creating the emanation is because the shape itself acts like an antenna for the astral plane. And that's why they knew further that by modifying the shape on the pyramid, by making a slight indentation in the center of the four faces of the pyramid, it's so slight you can't see it from the ground. You have to see it from the air. And from the air, you can see here the slight indentation at the faces of the major pyramids at Giza Plateau. What that did is it changed the resonance of the pyramid from the general astral plane, where the lower astral has some questionable energetics, to resonate with the higher astral. And when you do that, it cleans up the energy that's being projected by the pyramid. So one of the great secrets is the geometries act like antennas to resonate with higher planes of creation, and then as a secondary effect, they will emanate through the shape-caused wave a particular vibration that is the result of that particular connection. And they knew enough about it, in fact, to work not just with the general negative green ray, as we see here, but actually to work with sub-bands or sub-energies inside the general band. So the placement of the king's chamber inside the Great Pyramid is not in the exact middle where you might expect it to be. It's not in the middle. It's about 6 degrees, 15 minutes off of center. And so that's to get a particular carrier wave within the negative green band that's a sweet spot in the entire band. A sweet spot for being able to connect a person through a carrier wave to higher dimensional levels, which is why that place in the King's Chamber was used for these initiation rituals, as described by the Freemasons and others. And now let's talk a little bit about exactly how it works. So this is the vertical and horizontal wave pendulums. For each of the bands, the energy may either propagate parallel to the Earth's surface, we call it a horizontal wave, or it can move perpendicular, and we call that a vertical wave. They create different biological effects. And so we have two different pendulums to be able to detect it, and they're fairly simple to use. And this not only can be used for design purposes, to design things that have this strong vibration to them, it also can be used to test things that naturally have this energy. So what makes a spiritual power spot in nature is that it has a strong concentration of this universal harmonizing force, the BG3. Every classical tradition is the guardian of particular places on the Earth's surface that are their spiritual power spots. And now you can tell a true power spot from a false one that's been falsely claimed to be one, is that it has a strong concentration of this BG3 vibration if it's a true power spot. In the microcosm of a human body, those power spots appear as the chakras, acupuncture points, cells of the body, all of which naturally have this BG3 energy as well. And this connects to all types of energetic functions, and we primarily focus on it for healing work, but what it's actually doing is it's restoring a natural balance and resonance. The reason that we have this feeling of dis-ease is because we're no longer in resonance with the higher source that is supposed to be supporting the functions of the body. That's way beyond the consciousness of most people, but every classical tradition was aware of it, and they had to restore that connection. So in the ancient Egyptian mysteries, they understood about the importance, let's say, of the heart. And so there are particular biosignatures for the heart that not only have an effect at a more gross physical vitality level, it also has effects on human consciousness. For example, the place of the sinoatrial node, or the sinus node, the master pacemaker of the body, is actually the place understood by the ancient Egyptians and by Sufi traditions today as the place that higher vibrational forces resonate in the human physical body and restore our connection to higher sources. Years ago, I had a very serious car accident, serious damage to my neck and my spine, had a hard time just being able to move around, and through the use of the correct bionumeral alteration of a biosignature, it gave me back my quality of life. And when you change the numerical sequencing of the patterns, then actually changes the level that the pattern is vibrating with. Now, for practical work, one of the major things that we teach people is harmonizing electromagnetic fields. Dr. Karim actually demonstrated that he could harmonize the electromagnetic fields in entire small cities in a project in Switzerland in 2003. And we have various types of tools that we can use to create energetic effects. This biogeometry cube, but the cube creates a strong concentration of this BG3 harmonizing force in an environment. The Hamburg emitter was used in the Swiss project. This allows us actually to set this up and to target distant sources of electromagnetic disturbance, cell towers, things of that kind, and to actually transmute it from the distant source. Within a location itself, things like the space harmonizer will help to create a balanced energy within the location. The outdoor stand is used in the earth itself to balance and harmonize the energies in the earth. Now, one of the really fascinating things is the concept of balancing brain hemispheres. One aspect of it has to do with the basic concept of a toroidal flow of energy. Now, one of the things that I learned over 30 years ago, based on my work in the U.S. Marine Corps as a nuclear biological chemical warfare specialist, that then led to my studying geometric forms in biology, chemistry, and physics, and then into the work of finding the same patterns in classical traditions for healing and spiritual development, is that whenever you start working in a body of work and people start talking about a torus structure and they start talking about vortex patterns, you should pay attention because these are core energetic patterns that all creation are based on. So if you get a sphere, open it up, top and the bottom, and get energy to move through the center. Now the center of the sphere that connects to the original unified source and the periphery of the sphere that connects to the entire vibrational spectrum are constantly circulating together. Connect to the unified source going through the channel, go out to the created world on the perimeter, and now you've got a sphere that has a perfect energy circulation. That is the form of the energy field around a human body. It's the form of an energy field around phenomena from the microscopic up to the galactic. This is a very important energy circulation pattern. And the exact center of that is the channel through the center of the sphere that's in the form of a hyperbola. Hyperbola is kind of like an hourglass. And so there is a particular creation pattern that you see Dr. Karim has put into form here, where it's two hyperbola. And in the human energy field, this actually operates as one that goes through the central axis of the body, and that's what he refers to as the spiritual axis. And then there's the time-space axis that runs more on the horizontal axis through the body. Again, this gets involved, and I can't go through the whole thing right now. Just want to give you a basic idea. And so a bulge appears on one of these because when the independent being begins to perceive within space-time, it creates an expansion from the center outward, and it creates the bulge you see here. Now what this leads to then is that Dr. Karim found that there was a resonance when he broke the two forms apart to be two pillars. Sometimes he refers to them as the pillars of wisdom. This one here, without the bulge, without the space-time perception, resonates very strongly with the right brain hemisphere and the intuitive perception of a human being. The one with the space-time perception that grounds things into physical reality has the bulge coming out from the center from space-time perception. That's connected to the rational faculties of the left brain. Dr. Karim then added our biogeometry dials to the top that allows us to tune in different vibratory powers. So what you can do with this is you can actually tune any person's brain hemispheres to specific vibratory states. So one of the things that we demonstrate is that if you activate the person's visual cortex in their brain in properly tuning it in with this tool, what you can then do is from the visual cortex, you can fill it with the BG3 unified source vibration, and anything the person looks at will immediately harmonize with BG3 energy. They will become a harmonizing force straight through the visual ray coming out of the eyes. This is going into then practical things that they would do in the Egyptian temples with modern techniques. Now these earth energy grids are themselves connected to the whole vibrating matrix of the earth. And so one of the major things that Dr. Karim went into at this conference that got super deep is this concept then of what we described before about the toroidal energy structures of space-time that we use in the advanced training for tuning the human brain hemispheres. He connected that up with the vibrating matrix of all of the energy grids on the earth. And then looking at how that manifests once again as the space-time wormhole, which we have here, and then the mental spiritual wormhole here in the central axis of the torus around the human energy field. And then he began to go into very deep levels about how human beings are anchored into space-time through entire structures of these toroidal fields, back and front vortices in hyperbolas in the inside of the torus, and that is the foundation of all of the chakras of the human body. With then, just like in cosmological structures, you have the hyperbola, you have the vortex coming from two different directions, like at the chakras, and in between it, you get the spinning disk of BG3 energy, just like you see in cosmological structures. It says applicable to one life cycle or several lives. This is an entire pattern of the vibrational template for a person's incarnation to root them into space-time. He then took that further and talked about the way that we materialize things from the higher planes into physical space-time through structures of this kind, which then are replicated microcosmically inside the human body. And so, again, there's expansion and collapse with the BG3 field in the central disk. This becomes an entire cosmological structure and also leads to the concept of the gates. So when they describe in the ancient Egyptian tradition about the multiple gates you pass through in the Duat, or the underworld, in the higher dimensional worlds, these gates exist within the center of the toroidal movement, because the entire structure of movements in space-time and outside of space-time from one dimension to another are all based on the same template. Whether it's in your energy field or in great dimensional structures, it's the same pattern replicated at higher and higher levels and higher scales. It's what in sacred geometry we call scale invariance. And so this means then that our brain structure and our ability to perceive higher spiritual realities and things of that kind are a resonance between the structures that affect our brain hemispheres and the same structure at a higher level of construction elsewhere in space-time, in the movement through these dimensional gates. And so that's the concept in the ancient traditions, including very much in ancient Egypt, of initiation, of being able to travel through the gates. If you read the ancient Egyptian text that we have translated in modern times with the name that it did not have in ancient Egypt, which is the Egyptian Book of the Dead, its name in the original Egyptian is closer to the Book of Coming Forth into Light. That particular text talks about passing through all these gates in the afterlife that lead to all of these different attainments and different experiences. And this was then connected through what we often hear about today with near-death experiences of traveling through the tunnel. The tunnel is the interior of the torus. It's that internal movement. And there's an initiation bridge. Death is the walk across the bridge in the movement between the right brain perception and the left brain perception. The human mind and the structure of the brain is itself a microcosm of a higher dimensional structure that is the essence of initiation. And then when you get to the center, the crossing point in the human brain, that becomes the corpus callosum. And the way that we interact in a center point with BG3 harmonizing energy in the center, the effects of the two hemispheres. And every human existence, physical existence, is like a snowflake that then anchors with the left brain perception into space-time on top of a primordial ocean of energy. This has to do with the pulse of time in the human body. So your heart is connected to a higher source that creates the pulse of the heart. So the breathing of the lungs and the pulse of the heart are in a particular rhythm that's entrained as something at a higher level. Once that gets off that rhythm, all types of health problems are created. The balance of the time pulse in the heart pacemaker is connected to the weighing of the heart in the Hall of Judgment in ancient Egypt. That means that there is a master balancing method based on restoring the correct pulsation of time within the human body that connects to the lungs and the heart, but is also beyond the lungs and the heart. Simply creating correctly the sound of these things. The sound was the vibration itself. So that pronouncing correctly the name of this particular netter, Ma'ed, when you pronounce correctly the Ma'ed sound, it actually has the effect of harmonizing the time pulse inside the person's energy field. And by harmonizing the time pulse, can put them into resonance with higher forces. So this is a core part of uniting the different parts of the ancient Egyptian temple science.